Please explain the whole recent situation developing between the US, Russia, Ukraine regarding peace deals. Why has the US suddenly started supporting its biggest rival, Russia? Is Trump going to end his rivalry and take US Russia relationship to the pre Cold War era? He's also bashing Zelensky for starting the war and forcing him to sign the minerals deal. What's your take on this entire issue? If the US and Russia become allies now, how will it affect global geopolitics and especially Bharat? To recap everything that's happening, Trump wants to end this wasteful war. He understands and he realizes that Russia has the upper hand, and there's nothing the Americans or NATO or Europe can do to undo the gains Russia and Putin have acquired in Ukraine. There's no way the Russians will tolerate Ukraine becoming a member of NATO, and there's no way they will tolerate any crossing of the red lines. So this war, the Americans thus far have already spent about 300-400 billion dollars, tremendous amount of money. They are leaking money, they are bleeding money. It's enough. This is a pointless war. Um, it's damaging the U.S. economy, draining U.S. money. So Trump wants to end this. So that's why the war is now in the end game phase. Trump and Putin and their minions will get together, uh, hammer out the parameters of the deal, and then there's going to be a ceasefire, which will involve Putin getting everything he wants, which is a victory. Which is a victory for Russia in the war. He will keep the territory he has gained. He will ensure that Ukraine remains neutral. Ukraine never becomes a member of NATO. He will ensure that there's denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, which means that there's going to be peacekeepers of some kind in Ukraine, but the Ukraine military has to put down its weapons. He has already decimated the Azov regiment, which means to a large extent Ukraine is denazified. At least he can tell his people that it's done. And he's going to ensure that Zelensky is ousted. There's a regime change. So Putin gets everything he wants. Everything he wanted on February 2022, he will get all of that. And it's not a big loss for the US. It's actually good that the war ends. So Trump is not supporting his biggest rival. The US is not supporting his biggest rival. They're just ending the war. And you to understand another thing. There's a China factor here. So the war has pushed Russia very close into a very close embrace with China. And from the US perspective, China is a very big rival and a very big concern for the US, especially China's technological growth, technological advances in various fields, including AI, including all kinds of other stuff. So, and China is the second largest economy in the world. They have their issues and so on, but China is a very big concern for the US, and China's expanding naval strength, military strength. All of this is a big concern for the US. So the US would like to kind of take Russia out of this tight embrace with China. How do you do that? You end, first of all, you end the war, give Putin what he wants. Secondly, you ease the sanctions. You so if you ease the sanctions, then you can. The sanctions had decoupled Russia, the Russian economy, from the Western economy. So now you open up those ties again. And of course, you have to remember that everything was not shut down. There is this, if you go to any airport, major airport, then you will see that there is an airline called Aeroflot, Russian airline. Their planes are mostly Western planes, Boeings and Airbuses. And so those spares and supplies, the supply of that still continued during the war. So not, everything was not shut down, but yeah, Russia's banking system, economic system was decoupled from SWIFT and so on. So that may happen again. So if Russia gets access to the Western economy again, then their tremendous dependence on China will not be such a big factor anymore, and Russia will be able to kind of decouple to some extent from China. Of course, they will not completely give that up. Russia also understands that China is a valuable partner to have, so is India. So what the US wants to do is they want to take Russia out of its tight embrace from China. They want to make China feel more isolated so that they can eventually, the big agenda is to rein in China, to clamp down on China and ensure that China doesn't become a great power or a potential superpower in the future. That's the big objective. Trump's big game is China. It's not Russia. Russia can be dealt with by ending the war, which will happen soon. So that's actually what's happening. Zelensky is irrelevant. They're going to get rid of him at the earliest. Uh, so Trump is ending the hostility, etc., with Russia. He's going to make life easier for Russia. He will probably ease a lot of sanctions, bring Russia back into the fold of the global economy. And then he's going to focus on China. And in that, he's going to need India as well. So the US and Russia don't become allies. All that happens is that the hostility ends and they are no longer enemies. It doesn't mean that they become allies. Just because they have ended the war, they're ending the war and they are no longer enemies, it doesn't mean that they have become allies. Please understand the distinction. Um, so yeah, once this happens, once the war ends, once there's a ceasefire and Putin gets what he wants and Zelensky is out and so on and so forth, all of that stuff, then the war has ended. They are no longer enemies. Then what happens then is Trump and the US start focusing on China. And there's going to be consequences coming out of that, all kinds of first order, second order consequences. And it's going to involve India to some extent, maybe to a large extent, because the Americans will want India on their side. They're going to tell us, you're either with us or against us. Then we have to pick a side. But at least we don't have to go against Russia. Right? The past, let's say a year or so, there have been attempts, serious, concerted attempts by India and China to bring down the hostility that started with the Galwan clash 2020. And that succeeded to a significant extent. Of course, uh, we haven't demarcated the boundary, the India-Tibet border, which is the main bone of contention. But the temperature and hostility has come down. The two armies are no longer staring eyeball to eyeball to a large extent, and patrolling is now happening in a peaceful manner, and so on. So there is this area, this climate of improving relations between India and China, and the US may not like that very much. So that is where it could affect India. That's where it could affect Bharat. It could place us in a position where we have to make a choice. Either we want friendly relations with China, or we have to end all that and become kind of a US tool in its toolkit of containing and encircling China. So that is what could be coming up for us in the next 3-4 years.